Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the Coaching Cafe for this Friday. And our topic this week is keeping up the momentum and motivation. And I'm Paula, and I'm joined by the lovely Bridget today.
Hello, everybody.
Um, and we are going to take you through, we're actually going to do a little bit of a physics lesson. And I'm going to start this by clearly outlining that science was not my best subject in school. And actual fact, I'm going to let you in a little secret, everybody, that I actually had to talk my physics teacher in year 10 into giving me a D rather than an F. So this could be a very interesting conversation.
Very good.
Sorry. So before we commence, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we meet today and their continuing connection to the land, waters and communities of Australia and the lands from all around the world upon which you might be joining us. We pay our respects to them and their elders past, present and emerging, and elders from Indigenous communities around the world. Okay, so our agenda for today is all about keeping up the momentum and motivation. There's going to be a short lesson on physics, and I'm absolutely hoping there's people on the line who might be able to help me with this. And then we're going to look at what does that mean for coaching. As always, it's about creating community, creating shared learning experiences, having thought-provoking conversations, and at anyone who is here for ICF CCEs, they will be available at the end of the session. Okay, so as I mentioned, I don't have a physics background, so this is going to be as rudimentary as it gets. I do have a child going through high school, and I won't lie, I do a lot of ChatGPT to figure out what the physics and the science is all about. I don't know about you, Bridget. How are you at science?
Well, actually, I did do a lot of science back at school, sort of chemistry, biology, physics, but physics was probably the biggest challenge, I'd say, out of the chemistry and the biology. The physics is not so easy.
I'm with you. But the thing I love about this is the connection of what the physics is talking about. So it's sort of like taking this absolute strain of science that is definitive, let's say, and when you think about it and apply it to different things that we do and the social sciences, for example, it actually, I just think this is a really great way to think about something differently to get a different way to move forward with it. So I think that's what we're looking at today.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes having a formula that represents something for us gives us that opportunity to say, okay, I've got the prescription now. I know how to run with this. And sometimes that can be really valuable.
All right. So what is momentum? For anybody who would like to, I've put a little website there that you can go to if you want more information on this. So it's the Britannica.com/science/momentum. For anyone out there for whom science is not your forte either, I quite like the Kids Britannica because it puts stuff in a really simple form. But the formula for momentum is the product of the mass, so M is the mass of a particle, so the mass of a particle, and its velocity. So it's M times V, so mass times velocity equals momentum.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're doing all right. And so the thing about this is you think of yourself as the mass. So it's momentum is U plus velocity, which is movement, right? So we're talking about you being in this conversation. It's the person and movement. So person times movement equals momentum. And it seems like a really simple thing, but it makes a lot of sense. And so if an object is moving and has mass, then it has momentum. Objects with a large amount of momentum are hard to stop. So if you think, I sort of took this from the perspective of, if you think about an organization being a large amount of momentum, if you've got a large number of people each moving, taking a step, working on something, then it's hard to stop. But on the other side, an object that is not moving has no momentum. So there's nothing going on. And I don't know about you, Bridget, but I often watch, I'm not a runner either, by the way. I'm going to put my hand up and say not a runner.
Mm-hmm.
But you often see runners, and when they get to a traffic light, they run on the spot.
Yes.
And I used to think, man, why don't you just take a breath?
Yeah.
Why don't you just have yourself a little break? But when you think about it from this perspective, what they're doing is maintaining their momentum so that when the traffic light goes, they're able to keep going. Whereas if you are stopped, it's harder to get that momentum moving again. So I was like, okay, I get this now. They're actually, what they're trying to do is retain that momentum so that as soon as they're ready to go, they can take off.
Absolutely. And it sounds like if you're using the runner analogy, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to increase the velocity to be able to maintain the momentum. It can be flexible somewhat so that you're building that momentum, and there might be things that occur which mean you have to perhaps bring the velocity back a little bit and the movement, but you're still maintaining that momentum and you've got that ebb and flow.
Yeah, and I think something else to note is that sometimes there are forces beyond you that may be hindering some of that momentum. So if we use the running momentum, if you are running up a hill, for example, the hill means it's harder to keep the momentum going. Or if you're in a strong headwind, it is harder to keep that momentum going. But I know from some other work that I've done is that if you just keep moving, you will get to where you need to go. Whereas if you stop, it actually makes it really hard to keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody's with me on my physics lesson so far. And if anybody has anything to add, please pop it into chat for us, because I'd love any contribution at this point. So this is a little bit about what momentum is. And you're probably thinking, excuse me, I thought this was a coaching cafe, not a dodgy physics lesson. And you are absolutely correct, because what we want to do is think about this idea about momentum in regards to the coaching that we do, and in regards to ourselves and how we maintain our momentum.
Mm.
So what does this mean? And as we've mentioned, I've got my little elephant here, which is a big mass moved along slowly actually has a large momentum.
Mm.
And a small mass moved along very fast has a large momentum. So this is about thinking about the challenges that people are working on, or what they're working on, and thinking about it from the perspective of, if you have a giant mass or a giant challenge that you're working on, the idea that even if you're working on it slowly, it has large momentum.
Mm.
So if we think about this from a chunking perspective, Bridget, so if you have a big challenge and you chunk it down and you're working on small pieces of it, it still equates to having large momentum.
Yes. Yes. And also referring to your organisation analogy before around big masses, or perhaps there's a number of people, perhaps it's around the whole team, and they're all looking to achieve the same outcome. So you've got a number of people that are using their strengths and their skills to come together, and they might be moving at a certain pace, but that big mass gives that large momentum, even though it might be chunked down to individual pieces. Everyone takes their role, but that creates that large momentum when we're all working on the same page.
Yeah, and I like this idea too about the small masses moved along very fast, that should be a large momentum, not a large moment, but work with me on this one. Um, and I think this happened to me yesterday. I felt extremely sluggish, and I was really struggling to get myself, I was struggling to get myself moving. So I started with some small things that I knew that I could get done quite easily. So I did those things, and it's almost like that if you're ticking things off, it's building that momentum and getting you going.
Yes, and it reminds me a little bit of what we were talking about last week too, Paula, around consistency as well. It's that, the small mass that's moving along consistently as well creates that large momentum.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And the only danger with this one is people who think just deleting emails
Mm,
is, like it actually has to be something that is I mean, I understand deleting emails can be something you need to do, but making that just the one thing that you do, it may not necessarily move your momentum, but there is actually really good value in saying, what's my low hanging fruit for today, and
mm,
let's get that done, and that way you are building the momentum. It,
absolutely.
yeah. So if you've got a really big challenge for the day, that chunking it down and picking things to do actually helps build that momentum.
Well, you're really noticing those small wins along the way, aren't you? So you're recognizing, great, tick, done that, feeling good. I've achieved that, which builds that momentum to move on to the next thing. So those small, manageable tasks, those small wins that you're noticing along the way helps to build that consistency, the desire to want to continue and build that momentum.
Yeah. Okay. So now we understand what momentum is. We know that a big mass moved along slowly can be just as helpful as a small mass moving very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
So let's have a look. Um, And I think we talked a little bit about this, Bridget, but how does momentum feel? And I think this is a really good question for when you're coaching people, is how does it feel when you've got momentum?
Mm,
And when we get momentum, we feel like we're on the move, unstoppable. We've smashed it. We've achieved a lot. You actually can feel the energy rising.
mm.
And I've thrown in another physics term there. Don't know if you noticed that, the energy rising to
Yes.
help keep that momentum going.
Yes.
So, and we achieve this by taking a big task, moving it along slowly, or taking small tasks and moving them along quickly.
Yeah, lovely. It's that real feeling of achievement, isn't it? Um, as you continue on, you're achieving it, you're feeling good, you're getting excited, you're smashing it, and that in turn builds that momentum to keep going and achieve more.
And if you even think about the language that I used before when I said I felt really sluggish and I
Mm,
felt like I was pushing myself along, and then that language changes when we've got momentum, because it's like, yeah, oh man, I was ticking those things off and I was happy as Larry. So it's looking for that language in when you're working with when you're coaching as well. Where is that language? What's the language that they're using? And
mm.
how do you identify that with them and then help them move it, and thinking about your big tasks or your small tasks?
Absolutely. So looking at, not only what does momentum feel like, because that feeling really helps to inspire you to move forward, but also to what does it look like? What does momentum look like so that we know actually what we're targeting and what we're focusing on? So what does it look like? How does it feel? Getting really immersed in that whole, what does it feel and look like momentum so that we're really clear around the plan moving forward.
Yeah. So we've got one more little science thing to pop in here, another little equation. So in coaching, it's also about looking at what's getting in the way. So I've pulled this from the inner game of tennis by W. Timothy Galway, which there's a link on here, which is theinnergame.com, which you can go and have a look at. And what he talks about is performance equals potential minus interference.
Mm.
So if we think about this from the perspective of momentum, your potential is the ability to be moving and to be achieving all the things that you need to do. And what can get in the way is the interference that comes along. So it's thinking about someone's performance is what their potential is, what they could be doing, minus anything that's coming up. So if we think about the runners, we talked about the wind coming in, big headwinds coming and stopping them. But if we're thinking about people in the workplace, there's lots of areas for interference.
Well, that's right. And it could be external. It could be in the environment, the interference that's getting in the way. And it also could be internal, the interference that's getting in the way. Perhaps the things that we're telling ourselves could also get in the way. So it's internal and external that we might need to consider when we think about interference.
Yeah, and I think this is where it's that opportunity to think of some really great coaching questions when you're working with someone around if it is a motivation, also if it is a momentum issue, what might those interferences be? What might be getting in your way to stop you from building your momentum?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So some really good coaching questions, which we've talked about lots of times, haven't we, Paula? The who, what, where, when, and how questions that we can ask ourselves or others to really determine what is it that's interfering? What is it that's getting in the way of my potential, which equals that motivation, that momentum, that thing that we call performance, what we want to be doing.
Yeah. Okay.
I really like the little the P equals P, take away the I. These little pieces that we can say this is a prescription. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I was actually curious to be reminded with the first one that we looked at, Paula, that equaled the mass times the velocity. Was it P equals mass times velocity?
Yes, it was a little p.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And so you've got your P that equals your M times V and your P that equals P minus I. Having these little formulas in place is like having a prescription that we can refer to, that we anchor into our minds, that tells us, okay, I know the formula, I know how to do this, and I know how to now move forward and build that momentum because I know what the performance looks like. I know what my potential looks like, and I also am very clear around what the interference is. So now I've got that formula, I can move forward.
Yes, I really loved the idea of linking the science to it and going, well, we know that this is the science, and now what does that mean for us? And I agree with you. As soon as someone gives you a formula or a path forward, you go, okay, well, I can actually do that.
Mm.
I now know what those pieces are. So I agree with you. I like the little formulas that says if you and when you can recognize it in yourself. And funnily enough, yesterday was when I was looking at this information and I was like, I recognize that I don't have a great deal of momentum. So how do I get momentum? I need to be ticking things off and look for my low-hanging fruit. And so you can self-coach yourself along the way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, the formulas are definitely good prompters.
So I went and found some quotes. I really do love quotes from people. Just to add to this. So Anne Sweeney said, "Our future is only limited by our commitment to keep the momentum going."
Mm.
And what I really loved about that was it's acknowledging that you have that part to play in it. That says once you've got the momentum to keep it going, it's about you deciding that that's what you're going to do. And I really liked that.
Absolutely. We have control over whether we keep the momentum going, we keep the commitment, and, again, that consistency word that comes up that supports that momentum.
Yes, and Adam Braun said, for any movement to gain momentum, it must start with a small action. Because I thought that really linked in with exactly what we were talking about, was that you have, in order to get movement, you need the movement first to gain the momentum.
Yeah.
And then Steve Fernandez, who said, success is like a snowball. It takes momentum to build, and the more you roll in the right direction, the bigger it gets.
Oh, I like that one. That's good. Mm.
Yes, because I think sometimes there's people who think, oh, well, they're successful because of, you know, something that had nothing to do with the fact that they put hard work in and they got momentum and they built it. And then as it built, they just kept that momentum rolling. And that led to their success.
That's right. That's right. It's building on what you've already achieved. So if we can take that small step to start with, and we start to see those small wins, we're building on those successes. We can see that something's working. It subliminally fills us with confidence and excitement, which then in turn supports that momentum to keep going. So we're recognizing what's working well here, what might be getting in the way. So we still have a look at the interference potentially, and we navigate and we work around how do we continue that momentum. Like what you said about the runner at the traffic lights, they've slowed down, but they're keeping that momentum going. There's an obstacle in the way, the traffic light, but they're still continuing to stand there and keep the jogging going so that they can move back into where they were. So they're recognizing what's going on, really taking in the environment and making sure internally they're also telling themselves the right things to continue on.
Yeah, and I read somewhere, I don't actually know where it is, so don't quote me on this one, but it said if you've got something that you have that is in your life that could be completed in under 2 minutes, that you should actually do it when you see it and do it. Because one, it's that little momentum thing. It's sort of like I'll give you an example. I had some empty jars that had been washed that are sitting on my bench. So the question is, as I walk past the bench, do I leave the jars for later, or do I pick the jars up and put them in the recycling and so it's that idea that when you see something that can be easily done in that 2 minutes, that you do it. Yes. And I was thinking about it, that I think it connects in with, it's that building momentum.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly right. It is. It's recognizing you've done something small, you've done it quickly. It's brought that feeling of satisfaction and achievement. You've achieved something, and it builds that momentum to keep going and do something else.
So if you think about it from the workplace, it's that maybe there's a document that needs to be signed, and you keep putting it off to the side. But what if you just sign the document and put it in the next tray? So you've moved it and built yourself some momentum.
Yes, lovely.
So from a coaching perspective, this is one of my favorite tools. I don't know, I know that you use it as well, Bridget. So this is that from a coaching perspective, we're looking at stock taking what's happening, and then thinking about what has to change to enable momentum. And the tool that we use for this is the stop, start, less of, more of. So Bridget, do you want to tell us about this tool?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got the desired outcome that you want there in the goal, and it's a really great tool to consider, what do I need to stop doing that's going to support me in achieving that outcome that I'm looking for? And so you're brainstorming all the things, potentially one or more things that need to stop for you to be able to move toward that desired outcome. Then thinking about, well, if I've stopped doing that, what is it that I need to start doing instead that's going to support me in achieving that desired result that I'm looking for? The other things to consider are less of and more of. So, you might be doing something that perhaps it's a little bit overkill, or maybe you're doing a little bit too much of. So how do I balance that? What do I need to do less of that's going to give me better momentum? Perhaps it's something that's standing in the way. It's that interference, and I need to reduce it so that it's going to help me to build that momentum. And what do I need to do more of that's going to build up that level of desire to get to where I want to go? Build that momentum, build that movement. So then you have a bird's eye view of looking at, okay, so I know what I need to stop. I now know what I need to start. This is what I need to do less of, and this is what I'm going to do more of. Now that I've highlighted those things, what insights do I now have? What do I now know that I need to do? And so in that actions piece, down the bottom of the page, you can start listing the commitments that you're going to make that essentially help to build and enable that momentum moving forward toward that desired outcome, that goal you're wanting to achieve.
And I think this is a really important one to do as we come to the end of the year. It's actually quite a strange time because lots of people, so there are people who work all the way through, absolutely, but there's also people who sort of wind down towards that end of the year. And I think it's one of those times when can be dangerous from a momentum perspective, because if you wind down too far, then you don't necessarily achieve all the things that you want to achieve. The flip side of it is that there's often a whole bunch of other things that are now going on before the end of that year. So people have family commitments and all sorts of there's Christmas functions, there's Christmas activities, there's end of year bits and pieces. So it's kind of like a bit of a whirlwind for lots of people. And so I think in understanding that momentum piece, because you don't want your snowball to be going too fast that you're out of control. So thinking about that, and then you also don't want your snowball to stop completely so that you're not making the most of the quieter time that you might be having. Depends on what's going on for you. So I really think the stop, start, less of, more of is really helpful to go, what are the really important things that I want to make sure is in your goal space? So what are those really important things that I want to achieve? And then reflecting on it and going, well, if I want to achieve those things, what might I need to stop doing or do less of? And what might I need to do more of? And just being really conscious about it and making deliberate decisions about that end of year. And when you think about it with your teams as well, as a team, having this conversation at this time of year would be actually really useful, that says, we know that this is coming up, or that there's, whatever it is that's going on in your world. So let's take a little breather and say, as a team, we know that this is coming up. So what might we need to put less time into to make sure that we're hitting the things we need to do?
Absolutely. And what I love about this document too is it's a work in progress as well. It's a working document. It's not so set in stone. It's one that you can check in and that continuous improvement process as well, that you're always checking in to see what then gets taken off the list, what potentially might need to be added to the list.
I agree. So I'd love to hear from all of our people on the line if this is a tool that you've used before, if you can see it being useful, particularly as we're running into this end of year period. So please feel free to pop all of your comments and chats in there. All right, so we've had our physics lesson. We know more about momentum. We know how to get it, and we know that it starts with movement. So it's that the number one thing is to start with that movement piece. Nicole said she's used the stop, start, continue, but she likes the breakout of more of and less of in place of continue. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And Chopman said this is one of his most used tool for the coachees.
Lovely.
I think it's one of those ones that it's really simple to do, and it's really that insight and clarity.
Yes. Yep. Terrific.
All right. So getting the wheels turning, this was just is that momentum trumps motivation. When I hear lots of people ask, how do I motivate my staff? I suspect that it's not actually motivation, it's momentum that they need. Because motivation is intrinsic. So if you have momentum and if you can coach and work with your team to start the momentum, then the motivation, which is the feeling, will automatically kick in.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us and allowing us to have this little science lesson today. We hope you have enjoyed it. As always, we have our, actually this has got October dates up there, but our next dates for
2025.
us for in 2025. We also will have our Diploma of Organisational Coaching, executive senior leader coaching, mentor coaching programs, and mediation services. So please head to our website to check those out. I'd like to thank Bridget for joining me today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, Paula.
And we wish everybody a really happy Friday.
And if you're waiting for the